aka Sandra, and these are my daughters, Candace and Alyssa, and these are my daughter-in-laws, Brooks and Felisha. And we're so glad that you have come to join this online community of women where we come together every week to talk about topics that we all face in our day-to-day lives. And today our moderator is going to be Felisha, and we're going to talk about a little heavier subject today, but a subject that we think is very necessary.
Yeah. So today we're talking about something that really resonates with me because I've struggled with it pretty much my entire life, and it's anxiety and depression. And just kind of knowing that this is a topic that I felt like we should really talk about. This week alone, I have had 2 different phone calls from friends that are struggling so hard right now with just anxious thoughts and falling into that like loneliness, despair. And so I kind of felt like that was almost like confirmation, like, yes, like, we really do need to talk about this. Right. And for me, anxiety happens whenever I get these thoughts in my mind that I cannot, like, they almost seem like I can't control. And it's not even like scenarios that could even possibly happen. Like it's these outlandish, like,
just racing.
Exactly racing and thinking like this is going to happen. Then it causes fear. It causes dread of maybe that certain event I have to go to or things like that. And then what ends up happening is it starts to affect our physical, starts to affect us, our heart racing. It starts to, stressing about every single thing. I mean, physically, you get stomach aches, like you can have panic attacks, and people I feel like at some point, and we've all experienced this, maybe not to the extent of full on panic attacks, but just stressing about like even tasks in our home. And so I kind of brought this to our friends online, and I wanted to really know, what were you struggling with that maybe something like we have walked through and we can help someone else out there. So the first question, Mom, this is going to be for you.
Okay.
I'm really struggling in our finances. I feel like no matter how hard we work, we can not just get out of top. Can you please just give me your advice on how to not stress about things that I really can't pay for?
Wow. That's tough. That's a tough place to be in. We've lived that. We have been unless you really know us well, a lot of people don't know we were actually homeless in our lives. And so, we've been at the lowest lows that you can be financially, and we've been at very high highs of that as well. So it is tough when you struggle with finances, and finances can also take such a toll, not just on you, but it'll take a toll on your marriage. And so you have to know that you're on the same team and recognize that you cannot let those conversations turn into arguments, because you are on the same team and you're both, doing the best that you can do. A lot of prayer, a lot of just trying to, because I know sometimes it's just easy for people to go, oh, have a budget. Oh, don't do this or don't. But if you're only making so much, and some of our lowest time was when my husband worked in construction, and I called it the feast and famine time, because in construction, at least then, I don't know what it is like now, thank God. If you worked, you were paid. If it was raining or anything else, you weren't, because you couldn't work. And so you were either feast or famine. Yeah. And so I'm telling you, I did a lot of standing on God's word and just praying constantly, along with your practical things of just, doing the things that you need to do, and figuring out how to strengthen yourself mentally during that. And it might be going and doing something, and you can say, well, how do you do something if you're broke? Well, that's what my husband always said. But there are a lot of things out there that you can do that cost nothing. But you have to get out of your home and out of that dread and worry. Go do something. Go for a walk. go do something together that you can help strengthen that. And interestingly enough, I've had this conversation with a couple of my kids, and I'm like, did you know that we struggled financially? And some of them have said, I knew a little bit, but you never really led on. I mean, obviously we're in the homeless. They must have figured we're struggling.
Right. It's true.
That was a little giveaway right there.
Yeah. It's true.
So, but you have to always have hope that it's going to get better.
Yeah.
I think Candace still prays this prayer to this day of our family will never lack in food or finances.
Every day.
Because I prayed that so much.
Yeah. Wow.
For God to provide, because we needed to eat.
Yeah.
And so that's really the best advice. And just a little bit, that doesn't have anything to do with depression, but if you've been praying and you've been asking for God to send a way, send food, send finances, and someone wants to give you something, please don't say, oh no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
That happened a lot. I've told the girls, I laugh at the fact that they use baby wipes like, I use washcloths, because baby wipes for us financially was a luxury, because we could not, it was hard enough to afford the diapers. And so we could not afford the wipes. So I laugh when I watch them just pulling out wipes, wiping the counter off. And I'm like, hello? Yeah. But, thank God that y'all are nowhere where we were. And you want that for your kids, on that. For sure.
Flea, I wanted to add, because I know we're talking about anxiety and answering these questions, but I thought it was really important to recognize that anxiety is honestly, it's not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it is, if you look at it up in the medical dictionary, it is your body's physical response
to something
going on. So it's not something that you can just say, oh, this is not happening. It is okay to accept that you have these symptoms, or you have something that is causing you to do that.
That's true.
And that I always listened to or heard it being that it's just the unwanted or unhealthy thoughts that have taken over. And that's where you're just trying to cope with those things. So all of these situations that our friends have, written in about, like this anxiety itself, it has such a bad connotation to it.
Right.
But it's physically how you were made to deal with situations like this.
And your feelings are very, very,
very,
real.
very valid. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that might be one of the verses I stand on in the Bible whenever I go through, anxious seasons is take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ, because our thoughts are what's causing this hamster wheel pretty much.
Yeah.
And so again, I know it's hard, and sometimes you're like, I've said this prayer over and over and over. When is it going to work?
Right.
And I think that's what we're really talking about today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the next one is something that I think every mom has felt. So Alyssa, I'm going to send this one to you. I'm so overwhelmed by my to-do list at home. I don't feel like I can get anything caught up, and the laundry just keeps piling and piling.
Girl, same. Well, first of all, it's interesting even what Brooks has brought up, because I did not realize that I battled with anxiety pretty much my whole life. That was not something that was really talked about, not just saying in our home, but in general in the world. Right. I can remember going to auditions and stuff like that I loved and I was good at. It was nothing being forced on me. And I would throw up on the way to an audition almost every time we went. And we thought it was I have car sick, and not a big deal. Well, then I went to high school and it was the same thing. I would wake up and throw up before school every morning. I was just, but there wasn't a word for it. We went to get my heart checked because I would have attacks in school, or my chest would physically hurt. And not a single doctor was like, hey, Sandra, she might be battling with panic attacks.
Right.
No one, it just wasn't talked about it is now. I really think that the pandemic, as rough as it was, so many people really started battling with stuff mentally, and it changed a lot of the verbiage that we get to use now, because I always thought anxiety was like what Brooks was saying, this like kind of like meek person who's just really nervous about life. Like, oh, well, you have anxiety. Like, and it was a bad term, but I was putting myself in situations where I wanted to be on the stage and do stuff. So it was nothing like
those things brought you joy.
bad. I loved it. But my body's reaction to the stress was to act like that. And so speaking of to-do lists, when I was married, I started my master's program, and I would literally write out on sticky notes across my windowsill every single thought I possibly had of things that needed to get done, either from my master's or the house or I was still working full time, and I was at home at that point working from home. I would write everything out, and then I would sit down with my schedule, and I would schedule 30-minute blocks for every moment I was awake. Like I was so just
That's enough to make you anxious.
Yeah, well, and a little bit of me, mom says this too, that she's a recovering perfectionist. I have always we've talked about Hersey was our last name. There's a little bit of that that I just kind of naturally grew up in. And so my thought was, if I could find a time block for it in the day, I could handle it. And so not healthy. And I think all of that was right around the time that the pandemic happened. People were talking about mental health. And it was the first time that I realized, oh my goodness, I think I battle a little bit of making sure everything's perfect. And when my mind is like an absolute hamster wheel, then I start getting sick all of a sudden. Like I'm catching colds. I'm not feeling very well. Like, what is this happening to me? And I realized it was because I was putting these unrealistic expectations on me. So if you are the mom that's at home and you're like, hey, I have all these to-do lists, like I feel you, because I had to, in that season, realize that how I was living was not necessarily healthy. Like when I would go to sleep at night, I literally could not sleep because things weren't getting checked off. Like I would lay in bed and physically not be able to sleep because I wasn't checking boxes for the list I left myself that day. And that's not an okay place to be. So I'm not saying don't make to-do lists. I actually think they're very helpful. They help you brain dump, so your mind's not always doing this all the time. But what I am saying is just be realistic about the season that you're living in. For me, I stopped using sticky notes. I stopped time blocking my day because I was putting so much extra anxiety I didn't need in my life just by putting an expectation on me that nobody else was giving me. So for you, it might just be like, hey, I need to just brain dump. And then when I get to these things, I'll get to them. A great book to read that really helped me through that season is called Grace, Not Perfection by Emily Lay. She writes from the perspective of being a mom. So that's great if that's the season you're in. If not, I read this when I had no kids and I just was kind of battling with, I have too much of an expectation of myself. And it is a phenomenal read. I read it probably every other year because it's just such a good reminder to me to like not put those things on myself, because like Brooke said, my body reacts that way. And I just have to know that about myself that, okay, well then just maybe I don't need to put myself in a position where my body's going to react that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And giving yourself permission if you don't get to everything on the to-do list that day.
Right.
Because I do this too. It's like, I count off all the things I did not get accomplished.
Right. Instead of the ones that you did.
Instead of the things that I did get done.
Yeah.
So count off the things that you do get done instead of the things you didn't get to today.
Yeah, 100%.
Take those as wins.
Being a personal assistant, obviously I have a to-do sheet that just continues, right? So I downloaded recently an app because I was the same way. It was like, if I didn't get this done, I was staying up all night to get it done so that I have a clean slate the next morning. There's a new app. It's completely free. It's called like To Do. And it literally takes your stuff that you didn't finish and just moves it to the next day.
Which is so nice.
And you know what?
Yeah.
And it just, so it's all cleared and then you just move on and you can then prioritize what you have to do. But it was something for me. It was just like this release.
But
like,
how
it was
funny is it that just those little things, and that's why I'm saying, like, I'm for sure not saying don't have a to-do list.
Right.
They are very helpful, but you've got to find, maybe you do well with time blocking. Maybe you're like, hey, we've talked about this recently of like, Flea's like, I do better, not saying exactly what needs to happen at every minute, but being like, in the morning, here's my time block for this. And that works super well for fleas. So you have to figure out what works well for you. And if you're finding like I did, like, whoa, I'm like,
If you're making
really
yourself
battling
more
with this,
anxious,
then just switch it up and do something different.
That's not the solution.
Yeah, 100%.
Figure out what works for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So our next one, Brooks, I'm going to give this one to you.
All right.
I recently received a bad health report, and I'm very scared at what could happen.
Oh, wow.
Yikes. Well, family, friends. I'm going to actually like put stuff out here that these ladies don't even know about. So I feel you. I understand. I've been dealing with medical stuff basically my whole life. Oh gosh, don't want to tear up. And I want you to know that it's okay to be scared.
Yeah.
It is fully okay.
Yeah.
But yesterday I received a phone call. That was not what we wanted. And not a great result for the treatments that we've been going through. And I sat alone in the car as I had that phone call, and I could feel the anxiety, right? We all know that feeling. We know when your heart starts racing and you start worrying about everything that's going to happen from that moment on, and you let those worries and feelings just take over. And I'm going to tell you that, like I said, it's perfectly okay to feel that, and you have every right to do so. But I want you to know that we serve a bigger God who will take care of you and has this all figured out. And I want you to hold on to that. But I will tell you, in that moment, I sat outside work and, hung up that phone call. And of course you cry, you have your vent, you do what you need to do. But I took 3 deep breaths, right? You take it in, you ground yourself, and I feel like for me, I had to take a moment and just realize where I was, who I was as a child of God, who I had around me that was going to support me through this. And then, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And I think that's the number one thing, is just to know, surround yourself with the right people in that moment and in that time. And as you do that, I know lots of people will tell you, don't go to the internet, don't go to Google, don't become your own doctor. But, I'm a little different, and I've been dealing with this for a long time. And I do, I fully believe in arming yourself and protecting yourself with all the information that you can. Some people that's different, and it may not be you. You may be one that's like, hey, I just need to take a breather and a break and really just take this in. But for me, I went right to what I needed to find out so that I could be my advocate. I could put on the armor and I could know what was going on, and I could answer those questions and understand what the doctors were saying and advocate for myself so that I could put myself and my family's best interest in the decisions that were about to be made. So I think for you, and for, if you're dealing with a medical decision that needs to be made, you know yourself best, you know your family best. But for, to surround yourself with the people who are going to support you and love you, and just ground yourself in who you are, and that you will be okay, you will be taken care of, and that, it will all work out. Nothing is wasted.
Very true.
So sorry for that, Mom.
So when this question came in, I thought, like, Brooks needs to answer this. Like, Brooks is one of the strongest women, like,
superheroes
around us, and what your body's going through right now, and how just much you just are like, okay, God's got me. Like, that's a testimony to us here and every person behind that camera.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. And honestly, that's what I've always, strived for, is that I think in these moments, you kind of can be bitter or you can get better.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can live in that, or you can get better and you can show, God's love and his strength and, through what you're going through, and to be that light in any situation that you're in. Going through dialysis, it was not a fun place. No. There was a lot of sickness and illness and unhappiness, but to be able to walk in and crack jokes and be the smile for other people, that's what we're brought here to be.
Yeah.
So
good.
So good. Byproduct of anxiety can be depression.
Right.
And one of the multiple women reached out about postpartum. And this is where I'm going to try not to cry. And we knew that today was going to be heavy, but we also
Being
knew
real.
that
Being real. Yeah.
it needed to happen.
Yeah.
And unlike Brooks, where Brooks wants to know everything, to be an advocate, when I was pregnant, I went through the whole ignorance is bliss.
And that's
And-
okay. Right.
But I don't think it was in my case. So I had this fear that I never once told anyone during my pregnancy, is that I was terrified because of my family's history. Every woman in my family has hemorrhaged during birth. And so that was something that I carried the whole entire pregnancy. And then I give birth right in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm not allowed to have family in there other than my husband, who has no clue how the female body works.
And also passes out during
He
birth.
passes out like
You did know that because I warned you.
I did. Like he
He
ended up.
doesn't mean to. It's just all of it is too much, and he will feel like he's going to pass out.
Yeah, and he walked away a couple times.
Yes.
Because of that. And my worst fear happened. Like I ended up, that happened and stuff. And I remember when we left the hospital, I wasn't ready to, I physically was in no shape. I couldn't even hold my baby without sitting down. Like people had to change her for me because I couldn't stand up. And so we ended up at Mom's house, and I remember just crying every night. And I'm sure, Mom, I'm sure you were like, something's wrong with her. And it got to the point where Mom's like, okay, you need to talk to our therapist. We have a family therapist, and I am a total advocate to see someone who professionally knows what they're doing and how to handle situations like this. And so I continued to see her, and about 6 months in of just seeing her trying natural things, she finally was like, I think you need to go talk to your midwife. And come to find out, she's like, my midwife was like, I think you're really dealing with postpartum. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I love my baby. Like, there is, I have no like feelings of harm, because when you think of postpartum, like women have this negative concept
that they're detached.
And that you don't love your baby, you don't want them, and that wasn't me. Yeah. And so I was and if that is something you're struggling with, like that's okay. Like talk to your doctor. That's what you need to. That's what you need to do. But for me, they ended up putting me on medication, and I have been on my daughter will be 4, and I've been on medication since she was born. And I'm just so thankful that we live in a time that God has given wisdom and direction for medical doctors to help us with these mental illnesses. And
if you have to take medication, it's totally okay. We don't have a problem with taking medication for blood pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
So why would that? This is a medical thing. So if you need to take medication, take the medication and live your life better. So that you can handle that.
So that's just my advice for any person going through postpartum. Like, seek professional help.
I'll say too, since we're talking about that, if you are a mom that is currently pregnant and you feel detached or a little depressed, like that is something, I'm not going to cry during this, but that is something that both of my pregnancies, I did not realize how much I struggled with depression while pregnant until they came out. And then it was like instantly I was like, I am myself. Like,
you were sicker than most people are ever sick.
And I think that I thought the first time it was circumstantial. Like I was like, oh, I was so sick with my first. That's why I felt that way. And then I felt it really bad my second as well. And I had a lot of anxiety attacks that poor Dale had to sit through at night with me. But I realized, like, if you are someone that is what you're going through, I felt like, man, I'm going to be a horrible mom if I can't do the simplest thing of like growing the baby. Like they're not even out yet and I'm struggling.
The baby's growing without your participation, FYI.
But I will say, if that's something that you struggle with, I know that it is such a Pinterest, like perfect, the baby bump, and they take the photos and they have the gender reveal and they love those things. If that's not you and you're like, that is okay. Like you are still going to be a phenomenal mom. Maybe you battle with that depression side before they're here. And I think it's talked about almost less than postpartum, that you can feel that while pregnant, and that is totally okay too. Again, please talk to your doctor about it and see how they can help.
And I want to add to that, because I know, like we're talking about we're talking about after, right? Well, like with mine, it was a traumatic birth, right? Like I had a C-section that Kingston was, 4.5 weeks early. He was 3 pounds, and then we lived in the NICU for the 8
Long
weeks.
time.
Yeah.
And so like going through that, because I've dealt with stuff, I pick up my armor and I go. But after those 8 weeks, it was like my body didn't know how to act, and it's like at that point you think, oh, we're good. Like I just need to deal with it and move on and keep going. But you're still dealing with something. And even though if you don't label it depression, or if you don't feel like, you still deserve to talk to somebody and be okay, that it's okay to have feelings and nervousness and worry, after you've gone through something.
Right. Even if it's not, you need something diagnosed, like just being like, hey, I'm struggling. And I think maybe just talking to someone, going to therapy, whether or not that ends up with taking a prescription or just, I need to talk, like that's okay.
Right. Yeah. But I was like, 'cause you said the word diagnosed and it clicked. One of my doctors said that a diagnosis is not the end, it's a beginning.
Yeah, they know where to start.
Yeah, a diagnosis is not the end. It is the beginning for you to start feeling like yourself again, to find the path that you need to go on. So for a medical situation, for, postpartum, for anything like that, like don't be afraid to label it. Let's just figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's really good, Brooks. Our last question, Candace, this is for you. I am struggling with feeling so lonely. All of my friends are married with kids, and I just feel like, am I ever going to find someone? I feel just like at the end of my rope.
Been there. Definitely. Now you made me cry.
I know.
Well, and
like
also it's important to point out, we're going to talk about age, how old, because people we can't assume that everybody out there knows your story of that. So
Because you're so beautiful.
right. And
People don't know.
Or people think, oh, she's been married before. There's no way she was never married and waited this long. But you did.
Yes.
You waited till you were, I'll say it, she was 39. So she waited till last year to get married.
I did.
Never engaged before, never married before. You waited a long time.
I did.
But that's important for women to know.
Yeah.
And even if they have been engaged before or married before and can still feel this way, but it's important for people to understand.
And I'm glad I waited. I'm glad. I'm so happy when I did that. But there is a part when you are single and you are lonely. Yeah. You're in your room. You're like, where are your friends? Where are your people? It's okay. Because guess what happened? Try to pull it together.
I'm going to be Candace. Breathe.
Yeah. I did not think I was going to cry on this one, guys, just to be honest.
Candace is the breath person in our family. Tell us breathe.
So a hand was on my shoulder. And it was God. He's like, hey, I'm right here. I've never left you. I've never forsaken you. And for all these people who are out there struggling, he's not gone.
Yeah.
He's right there for you. All you have to do is say, hi, I'm willing and I'm open to please come sue me.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. So then I prayed. I was like, okay. And then I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it for me. I'm an independent woman. Yeah. And I am going to conquer the world. And then when I build my palace and what I want to do, my handsome prince will come. And he did.
Yeah.
So it will happen. Yeah. They're not going to be lonely forever. This is their time to work on themselves and to be the best person for their husband who's coming on the way.
Yeah. Get out and live your life while you're waiting for him.
It's the best.
Because they're worth the wait when
they are definitely
you
are.
wait
We were talking about something totally different this week, but you've brought it up because you talked about, building your castle and being your princess. Yeah. But you had mentioned earlier this week when we were having a totally different discussion, how when you do that, your prince or your person will come and he's going to add to that. He's not going to take away from that.
Right.
And you're not going to have to change that.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's what something like for somebody who may be single and in this lonely season, it's tough. It's rough. Yeah. Your heart's hurting. But when you do find, you find God in that and you take joy in the things that, you do. And then you create for yourself the best person that you can be.
Don't take it from you.
That other person will come or that other community will be there and they're going to find you and it's just going to continually build you to be the best person.
Yeah, it is. There is really practical people out there in the internet universe. I know one, her name is Emily May Wilson. She does a course called Loving Your Single Life. So there are places out there that you can use YouTube University or listen to different podcasts or take courses that really talk about that season of life and owning that season, because you only have it once. Like that's the truth, is once you're married, like that season of your life is done. So owning that season.
Enjoy the only having to cook and worry
for yourself
about yourself.
It's so great.
I just want to thank y'all so much for being just so open and vulnerable today. Thank you. And I know next week we're talking about joy. So come back.
Joy in the morning. Yeah, this was heavy, but it was, something that we felt like, okay, enough people need to know. And we say this all the time, we're not professionals in any means. We're just professional in what we've walked through. Yeah. And so we're just sharing what we walked through, but I encourage you to, find someone that you can have a conversation with and trust. And if you need to go and see someone, seek counseling. We are huge advocates for counseling. So do that. So until next week, just know that you're loved. You are absolutely loved, and we're grateful that you're here every week. Yeah. So till next week, we'll see you later.
Night.